Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney. Today's review is going to be on cookies today. So the first thing I wanted to say is this was last updated actually this year. That's really great. I've talked a lot about the fact that it's really important to look periodically at your public-facing documents to ensure that they address how you're processing personal data currently. If you have a privacy notice that is like 5-6 years old, you need to be looking within the business to verify whether or not the representations you make on your site about what you're currently doing are reflected to your audience. Now, I always think of websites as a digital storefront because let's just take, for example, my own law firm. There is a physical building that you can come to if you would like to know about my services. However, you can just go on the URL and type in the law firm name. And there's so much information that you can get off of my website's storefront. That's how I like to think about these organizations and businesses that have websites. As you enter the storefront, you're presented with the insight and knowledge that there's certain personal data that's going to be collected on you, including cookies. So as you enter the store, which is the website, the digital storefront is now letting you know and putting you on notice that as you enter the storefront, you are going to be presented with the fact that this organization is going to obtain your personal data in some capacity, whether it's through the cookies or an alternate means. And we can see here that they have a button here that says login. Let's actually click it. I want to talk about this. So if you click login, I personally don't have an account, but look at this, email. This is their digital storefront in which they're going to collect your personal data, which is email. Your email identifies you. If we put my email in, Funmi Owolabi, then this organization will then know and be able to authenticate that I have the ability to log in. So different stages within the website, the storefront, you are going to be providing your information to this organization. Now, I don't know if after we click continue with email, you're also presented a page that says enter your password, but those two pieces of information can identify you as an individual. So in that respect, this organization can process your personal data. When they process your personal data, there are obligations under the data protection laws on the manners in which they can process that information. And they have a responsibility in the geographies where they obtain this information to protect it based on what the law says. There are laws on how you can process this information. So I want to go back to the cookies. And the reason I went on that little tangent is because the point I wanted to make originally was the fact that reviewing the online statements that you tell your consumers needs to reflect what you're doing in practice. And that's why this date is so important. And I pretty much look for a date on all the reviews I do on this channel. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is go to control. Now, for this particular website, I wasn't presented with a cookie banner, and I also wasn't presented with the opportunity to manage my choices, my privacy choices. And I'm going to click this and see if this relates to the cookie preference center. So you can manage your data here. So this doesn't appear to allow me the opportunity to control my cookie preferences. It seems to be about other situations like limiting use of my data for ads, and then the opportunity to erase and access, but it doesn't specify the cookies that we're going to go back to. So I'm just going to go back to the page. So we can see here that there are advertising cookies. We can see that there are reporting and analytics cookies, and we can also see that there are social media and content. When this type of information is going to be collected by a visitor, which I'm a visitor of the site, right? I should have the opportunity to control whether or not these cookies are obtained as I interact with the site. Because that's what it's saying here, to our website to interact with, okay? So I don't know if this is all applicable to me. Again, the cookies are going to vary based on how you interact with the site. What I want to discuss is the fact that there should be a center where I'm able to manage which of these cookies apply to me. Now, one thing I will say is really valuable that I personally like is the fact that they've entered the duration. Let's talk about retention for a minute. Retention is a really important privacy word because no data should be kept indefinitely, no data, whether it's a name by a business, an email address, a phone number, etc. There should never be an instance where a company is retaining data forever. There should always be a purpose for collecting. And when that purpose ends, then the data needs to be deleted. And that's a foundational principle that transcends all privacy legislation. So I really think it's valuable to have the duration here. I've not seen that in other cookie reviews that I've done, but I definitely think that this is really valuable. And again, this ties into this date above. Let's say, for example, in another year, how the cookies are distributed on the site changes. Just an example, tracking consent. If there is a purpose that the organization has for using this particular cookie in a different manner, that needs to be updated if the duration is going to change, which is why it's valuable to re-review and review these over and over again. So I want to go to see if there's any definitions. I have a different checklist that I generally will distribute on what cookie should look like. And that's generally why I do these reviews, because I think it's valuable to see what other organizations are doing and what businesses can potentially take away on why it's important to, one, draft a cookie notice at all, because this is your digital storefront. And in interacting with your digital storefront, you are going to be processing my personal information. So you have a responsibility to, one, present me with notice, two, be transparent about your practices related to my personal data, and three, give me the opportunity to manage my preferences as it relates to my personal data. So there is a definition here which I think is really valuable. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this review is only 10 minutes. It's impossible to capture everything that needs to be done in any one notice, but there's certain observations I like to make because I not only draft these for a living, I also review them because I think it's interesting to see what's happening year over year when it comes to privacy program management. And as part of any privacy program management is the external facing privacy documentation. So as part of any program, there are internal and external documentations. Now, let me give you an example. Not talking about privacy, let's talk about a different area of the law. Employment law. There is internal memos that are distributed to stakeholders of an organization that a lawyer will draft on how employees should be treated in the workplace. Those documents are not distributed to everybody. However, in the same manner, there are documents that are distributed to employees. For example, a contract between a company and its employee. That's an external facing document. Now, what's gone into that contract drafting is different in that there's internal documents that influence that contract that's distributed. There's internal considerations. Maybe the employee is located in Nevada. Maybe the employee is located in, California. The contract that's distributed is all of the behind the scenes work that influences who the employee is based on their geography, right? We think about that type of thing similarly in privacy. There's a lot of internal documents that generally go into the drafting of this cookie banner, and we know that also because we looked at the privacy choices. Now, I still haven't been able to locate, and it may be here, but I haven't been able to locate where I'm able to control my cookies directly on this site. This particular website talks about managing cookies on this website, but they don't provide their own preference center from what I've seen so far on how I can control them directly from this site. And we know above that they've articulated reporting analytics cookies, social media and content, and also advertising, in addition to others. So the reason I made the distinction with employment law is because the same type of notion applies with privacy in that there are external and internal facing documents. I guess the takeaway from this particular review is it's really important to have this because it demonstrates that the organization has reviewed this to ensure that it reflects what's being done internally. And that's the whole point with all of these. I am yet to come across a website in 2026 that doesn't at least have a privacy statement or privacy policy. This one has a privacy policy and a cookie. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have comments about what I've stated, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another review.